Hello and welcome. My name is R.B. Whitaker. I am the author of the C# Player's Guide. And in this video, I'm going to be working through some of the challenges in my book. This is going to be largely unedited, just you and me sitting down to talk about how to solve these challenges. Now, the reason I'm doing this without a lot of editing, there's a couple of reasons. The first is that it is really easy as a beginner to think that the veterans just sit down and just spew forth a fountain of gold-plated perfect code covered in sprinkles and whipped cream with a cherry on top. And that's just really not how it works. So I want you to be able to see the mistakes, the rework, the process, the journey that goes into this, even for somebody who has a fair bit of experience. Having said that, I do have a couple of advantages that other people won't have. The first is that I have been doing this for decades. I've been writing software for a very long time, and C# also for a very long time. Another big advantage I have is I wrote the challenges, so I know what the author was thinking. And that's a pretty big advantage. The other thing is I have solved these challenges before. It's been a while, so I'm hoping I've forgotten a lot of the details and we'll just see a new version. The other thing that I need to say, though, is the reason why I'm keeping this pretty unedited, pretty raw, is I don't really have the time right now to add in a bunch of animations and effects and fancy things. I need to just keep this simple enough so that I can actually do it and work through the challenges. So maybe I can add in some animations and some fancy things later, but right now it's just a pretty simple, straightforward working through the challenges. The plan for this is to just go for about 30 minutes and do what we can. We won't get through all the challenges, but we'll hopefully get through several. I am going to be using the 5th edition for this, but if you've got 4th edition, as far as challenges go, they are almost 100% identical. So if you've got 4th edition, don't worry, there's going to be no real big surprises. And with that, let's get started. So the first challenge, let me open this up really quick here. The first challenge is actually a knowledge check. Now, I'm on the fence about whether it's worth doing these knowledge checks. I think the programming exercises are a bit more interesting. So we're going to try this for now, and if you have an opinion on whether it's worth doing the knowledge checks in the future, leave a comment. So let's start with this one, though. So the first question is, true or false, C# is a special purpose language optimized for making web applications? That one is false. C# is not special purpose. When people talk about special purpose programming languages or domain-specific languages, they are referring to something that's very narrow in terms of what the problem it solves. Ideally, to be very good at one specific thing, C# is, if it has a narrow focus, it's application development. So, for example, I wouldn't want to write an operating system in C#, but C# is really meant to be anything that you want, you can do. So web applications is perhaps the single biggest thing that people do with C#. There are a lot of web applications written in C#, but it's not the only thing. I mean, you can make desktop applications, you can make smartphone applications. A lot of video games are made with C# and Unity. So C# is meant to be a broad, general purpose programming language. So that question is false. The second question, what is the name of the framework that C# runs on? The name of that framework is .NET. If your answer was .NET Framework or .NET Core, those are correct answers as well. But .NET is that it's a framework, but it really, in my mind, it's a lot more than that. It's a whole ecosystem that is what it surrounds your C# program. It's the foundation that it builds on. It's all these utilities and tools and things that make it so your C# programs are easy to write and make it possible for C# programs to work. So .NET is the answer that I've listed in here. Like I said, .NET Framework or .NET Core are both correct answers as well. There's some nuance there. That's for another day. If you said .NET Framework or .NET Core, that works too. All right, let's, so that's the end of that first one. Let's jump back and find the next one. So this challenge, as your journey begins, you must get your tools ready to start programming C#, install Visual Studio or another IDE, and get it ready to start programming. Now, I, of course, already have Visual Studio installed, but I still want to kind of work through the system here. So I'm going to come down here and search for Visual Studio installer and find this. If you just go get the download from the internet, it'll download this same installer and it'll bring up. I think it will actually bring you into essentially. Sorry, I didn't want to actually start doing that. The update. So what I want to do is come into modify. So what you should end up with is a screen that looks pretty similar to this. And I want to walk through this because it's important to get the right stuff. A lot of people don't get the right stuff installed, and then later on they're like, wait, I feel like I'm missing stuff. What am I missing? What did I do wrong? In short, so there's like Visual Studio is gigantic, and if you install every single component that exists, you're going to have a really large. It's going to take up a lot of space on your file system. You probably don't want that. For this book, the one that gives you access to the console applications that we're building, is this one right here called. Well, let me take a step back. So there's a lot of individual components, but in order to do any particular type of application development, you really need a bunch of these individual components. So what Visual Studio does is it packages a bunch of them up into these things called workloads. So if you're doing web development, here's a workload for you. If you're doing Python development, here's a workload for you. If you're doing mobile development, here's a workload for you. If you check this box, this .NET Desktop Development box, then and just that's all you do. You check that box and then say install. You'll get everything you need for this book, and honestly, a whole lot more. So you can come in here and you can install any of these workloads that you want. If you're sitting here saying, well, I'm planning on doing web development soon, you can check that box. If I'm going to do mobile development soon, you can check that box. Like any of these that you want, you can install. But you can also just come back in later and run the installer again like I just did and pick the workloads you want. Like I said, this installs a whole lot of components. There's a bunch of these that are optional. So if you're low on disk space, you might be able to kind of cherry pick and say, maybe I don't need all these things. In general, I would say, just check the workload box, and that's probably all you actually need. But like I said, there's a lot of like nuanced control if you want it. But so for most people, I suggest keep it simple. Just just check the box on this, and don't worry about anything else, and just say install. Now I've already installed, so I don't need to run that step. It takes a few minutes. It's still quite a bit of stuff in there, but that's the idea. And that's basically it. Just check the box on that one workload, and you should be good. Eventually, you'll get to a point where you can see Visual Studio in here. I have pinned mine. I'm going to close the installer now. So I pinned mine, so I've got it down here. I use Visual Studio all the time, so it makes sense to have that. And then you got Visual Studio installed, and we'll open it up for the next challenge. So let's see. So that's another 75 experience points that we have earned. That's 100 total. Let's see. So the next challenge is Hello World. So all this is asking us to do, I'm not going to read this. You can read it yourself if you're going through the book. All this is asking us to do is basically open up, make the default program and run it. So it's pretty straightforward. So I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to say, just open it. If you're just starting, you're not going to see much in here, and that's okay. These are programs I've opened in the past, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to click here on Create a New Project. Oh, I should say, if you just installed Visual Studio, you may get some like setup screens that I've already been through, things that allow you to like pick a theme and potentially like log on. There's nothing about any of those pages that you must do any particular way. You can pick whatever theme and key bindings you feel like you want. So let's see. So, and eventually you'll get to this screen here. And so what we're going to do is just going to say create a new project. So this step right here is also one that people tend to get wrong a lot. The one we're looking for just making a really simple Hello World application is this one right here. It's this console application. Now, there's a lot of other things in here that you can see that are quite similar and easy to confuse. You are looking for this has a C# icon. You want that one and not this one with the VB icon. That's Visual Basic. It's a totally different programming language that also happens to use .NET, but you don't want that one. And then this also has console app .NET Framework. That's an old template. .NET Framework is an old version of .NET, and it's not the one you want. So it may be easier to sort of filter this down by coming in here and saying, well, I want just C#. So now that the Visual Basic one is gone, you can leave that as that. And if you come in, if you choose out of all the project types, if you just choose console, now you don't have, there's not very many choices left. So it filters it down a lot. In general, once you found the template, it's easy to find it again because it shows up under this recent project templates. So you don't necessarily the hard search to find the one you're looking for. You only have to do once, and after that you can just pick it from the recent list. But until you pick it the first time, it won't be there. So, but this is the one you're looking for. Like I said, you can tell it's the right one because it says C#. It's it lists not just Windows. .NET Framework is only Windows. This one can run anywhere, so you can see, that's another hint. It's got Linux, Mac OS, Windows. So, but this is the one you want. And enough about that. Let's move on. Give it a name. I know I've got several Hello World things, so I'm actually going to. I think I've got a Hello World and a Hello World 2. So I'm just going to pick a name that I can use to find it later. Unfortunately, I already have those project names, so I'll stick a 3 on there. You shouldn't generally need to be putting numbers on it. And this location is the default. That's a fine location. Just remember where it is so you can look for it later. You can check or uncheck this box. There's every time you make a new project, projects live in solutions, and solutions can have many projects or just one. And for most of the things we're going to be doing, we're only going to have one project in the solution. If you uncheck this box, which I believe is the default, then you will get a folder on your file system for the solution. And then underneath that, you'll get a folder for the project. And so you'll have like a Hello World folder, and then inside of that Hello World folder, if you're making giant solutions with lots of projects, it makes sense to have that extra layer of hierarchy to organize all of your projects underneath one solution folder. Where we're just making simple things right now, you don't need that extra layer of folders. So I usually check this box and place the solution and project in the same directory, unless I know I'm going to be making something really big. It's not like you can't change it later, but it's certainly more convenient to just have it right in the first place. So I usually check this box. You don't need to. And I'm going to hit next here, and now I'm going to pick my framework version. You can see I've got several versions to choose from. The version that I want is the latest, which right now is .NET 6.0 long-term support. And so I'm just going to make sure I get that .NET 6. If you choose an older version, if you have, you may not even, depending on what you installed, you may not even have .NET 5 or .NET Core 3.1. So it may be simpler for you than this because there may only be one option. But that's you want the latest and greatest, which is the one with the biggest number. It says .NET 6. In the future, there'll be a .NET 7 and a .NET 8, and you'll probably want those then. And now I'm just going to say create, and then wait a second for it to generate my program from the template. And here we go. So this is the program, and all it says is, so the only other thing we need to do now that we've got a console application that targets .NET 6 is to run it. And there's a lot of ways we can do that. The simplest, which I'm going to just do here, is I just got this green arrow button, and I'm just going to push that and run it. And I don't know if it's going to, where that's going to open that up. I can say build succeeded down there. It opened the window on the wrong screen, but here it is. So that's my whole program, and I'm done with this challenge. So that's another 50 experience points. That's all we had to do is just make the thing and run it and see it run. All right, on to the next challenge. So the next challenge is this one. What comes next? And all we're asked to do here is change your program to say something besides hello world. This right here is the place where that text is decided. And all we need to do is change this to say something else. So I don't know what we can make this say, but it really doesn't matter. I could spell. So now it says something different. We can run it again and see that now our text says goodbye instead of hello. And we are done with that challenge. Pretty easy. On to the next challenge, which is actually right here on the same page, the makings of a programmer. So make a program with 5 console.writeLine statements in it, and then answer a question. All right, so we could just come down here and type, more write-line statements. I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to show you a really cool shortcut, and that is Control D. Control D duplicates a line. So if I just put my mouse on this line and I hit Control D, and now I duplicate that line, I got another one. So there. Now I got 5 lines in here. I'm actually going to delete this comment. We don't need that right now. And we just need this to have 5 lines. This could be anything. I'm going to keep this simple. And put, write 1 letter of hello on there. And now I'm going to run this again. Now you can see that it wrote it vertically. Hello. Top to bottom. So the question that this challenge also asks is, how many statements do you think a program can contain? And I think this is there isn't a right or wrong answer to this. I think there may be more correct and less correct answers. Obviously, by asking that question, the thought process is so obviously we can write 5 lines. Is there this question is hoping to get at it, the deeper thought of, is there going to be some sort of limit? And I hope intuitively the thinking is, I don't see a reason why there should be any sort of hard limit. And I said I did Control D before. I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna hit Control D. I have multiple lines selected. Hit Control D. I'm just gonna sit here and do this for a little bit. There, I just really quickly made almost a 10,000 line. Wait for it, I'll get to 10,000 lines. There, and I have 10,000 lines in my program. So obviously there's not like any, and we can run this. This is going to take a while to actually run because it's a lot of output. But so obviously that like there's a like I can see this just spewing out hello, hello, hello. The hope, I mean, like, is that you could look at this and say, well, obviously there isn't like a small limit. Like we can write really big programs. We can write a 10,000 line program. So that I think is the real answer I'm going for here is to just kind of have that realization of, we could write big programs. We can write as much lines of code as we want. I do like at some level there are some like limits to it though. Like at some point if you compile this and you end up with something so big you can't store it on your computer, that obviously is going to be a hard limit that you can only like if the program is too big, then you won't be able to actually compile it. You'll run out of disk space at some point. That's probably way more than 10,000 lines. It's probably billions of lines or maybe even more. And that obviously also depends on how much disk space you've got. But that's probably some sort of like practical limit. And I have done a lot of reading about C#, and there's like in a lot of random places there are limits, and they're usually very big. So it wouldn't surprise me if there's some sort of other limit to the language where you can't just add more statements. That maybe I don't know what that might be, but there might be some sort of like limit defined as a part of the language that says no program can have more than X number of statements, or no method can have more than some number of statements. I have never ran into any such limit, but it wouldn't surprise me if that exists. It's just so far beyond what a person's actually going to do in a normal scenario that if to the extent that there's limits, there's not any like practical limit that you're ever going to run into. So for practical purposes, I'm sure that the answer is no, there's not limits. Technically, there may be something out there, though. Like I said, the disk space thing is a limit of some sort. All right, I think we spent enough time talking about that. Let's do at least one more challenge. And this challenge is this Consolas and Telim. So the idea with this program is this is our first time getting input from a user. And we're basically supposed to recreate this program here. So we say, hey, the bread is ready. Who's it for? We type in a name, and then we say, okay, that person got bread. So some of this is pretty straightforward. Like to get that first line that says the bread is ready. Should look just something like that, just a simple console.writeLine. And then our next line is similar. We ask the question, who is the bread for? I keep typing break. Bread for. And now here's kind of the new part, is we need to get input. And that's done with readLine. And we need to store this result somewhere. So we need a variable we know about from the book. We've seen So we make a variable, we call that variable name so we can use it later, and we use console.readLine to get a name from the user. So we'll wait for the user to type in a name and push enter, and then we'll have that name for later. And then the last thing we need to do is we need to say noted. I'm taking a shortcut here. Oh, dang, break. I'm taking a slight shortcut here. It's wrong, unless I happen to type in my own name here. So the simple version is, we do console.writeLine and just write it out. But what we really want to do is not just use a hard-coded name here. In fact, let's run this really quick. So I can come in here and I can say, who's the bread for? Well, it's for my cat, Ollie. Noted. RB got bread. So, like I said, we know it's not right. We type in a name, but the name we typed in isn't for the person who it was supposed to be for. The wrong person got the bread. So obviously, I got to change this here, and most of the rest of this text is right. So I'm going to just kind of edit this a little bit here, and I'm going to leave most of this text intact and just kind of inject right here in the middle of this that name. So now it'll say noted. Notice the extra space there, noted, and then put the name that we typed in. It pulls it out of that variable, and then that name got bread. Let me run this again, and we'll see now if I type in Ollie. Now it says the correct name. I think that's enough for right now, so I will stop and maybe we'll do this again in the near future. So thanks for watching, thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon.